Welcome back to Firepower. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. Because what's happening right now could change the landscape of American gun rights forever. This isn't just another court case. It's a national turning point. An emergency Supreme Court review that could erase every single gun permit law in America. No more applications, no more fees, no more waiting for government approval to exercise a constitutional right. If the filings and predictions are accurate, we may be weeks away from the most explosive Second Amendment ruling in modern history. So let's break down exactly what's happening, who's behind it, and what could happen next, because this case is moving fast and the stakes couldn't be higher. The Supreme Court of the United States has fast-tracked a case that directly challenges whether any state can require its citizens to obtain a permit for firearm ownership or carry. This isn't about making the process simpler or faster. It's about ending it entirely, declaring that no American should ever need to ask permission to exercise the Second Amendment. At this moment, 27 states already allow what's called constitutional carry, where no permit is required. The other 23 still demand government approval through various systems, often including fees, background checks, and mandatory training. The plaintiffs in this case are not asking for easier access. They are arguing that the entire concept of requiring permission for a right is unconstitutional. Their position is clear. A right that requires government approval is no right at all. What makes this development unprecedented is that the Supreme Court agreed to hear the case on an emergency basis, bypassing years of typical legal procedure. This decision signals that the justices recognize the question as urgent, perhaps too urgent to wait. The case began with a single federal district court judge who stunned the legal world by blocking an entire state's permit system, calling it unconstitutional on its face. He reasoned that there is no historical evidence showing that the Founding Fathers required citizens to seek permission to own or carry firearms. He also noted that modern permit systems only appeared in the early 1900s and were often rooted in discriminatory laws meant to disarm specific communities. When the state appealed, a 3-judge panel upheld his ruling in a 2-to-1 decision, declaring that requiring a permit to carry a firearm is like requiring a permit to attend church or speak freely. It contradicts the very idea of a right. When the state requested a full court review, the judges declined, letting the bold decision stand. That one move sent shockwaves through the judicial system and forced the Supreme Court's hand. Then came the twist no one expected. The U.S. Department of Justice under the Trump administration filed a brief supporting the plaintiffs. It wasn't a cautious endorsement. It was a direct attack on the legitimacy of all gun permits. The DOJ argued that any permit requirement, no matter how small, violates the Second Amendment because no other constitutional right requires government approval or fees. Their statement was clear. Citizens do not need permits to speak, pray, or protect themselves from unlawful searches. Therefore, they should not need one to keep and bear arms. The DOJ also presented real data. Violent crime dropped 4% in Texas after constitutional carry took effect, 3% in Florida, and 7% in Tennessee. It was the boldest federal position in favor of the Second Amendment in modern history, and it changed everything. Within weeks, over 25 states joined in support of the challenge, forming the largest coalition ever seen in a Supreme Court gun rights case. Texas, Florida, Arizona, Georgia, Tennessee, Missouri, and many others united to argue that permit systems are unnecessary for public safety. Their combined data showed that over 5 years of constitutional carry laws, crime rates remained stable or declined. They also highlighted the economic injustice of current systems. Permit fees of $50 to $300, mandatory courses costing up to $5,000 more, and time requirements that effectively exclude low-income Americans from exercising their rights. For millions of people, they argued, self-defense should not depend on money or permission slips. This state alliance added immense pressure on the Supreme Court, but what really forced their intervention was the growing conflict among the circuit courts. In some regions, courts ruled that permits are unconstitutional. In others, they upheld them as essential for safety. The Second Circuit upheld New York's purchase permit laws, the Ninth Circuit backed California's system, and the Fourth Circuit defended Maryland's restrictions. But the newest ruling went in the opposite direction, declaring that any permit requirement violates the Second Amendment. This kind of split created a constitutional crisis. Americans' rights changed depending on their zip code. That inconsistency left the Supreme Court with little choice but to step in. Even as the court prepares to hear arguments, anti-gun states are already developing countermeasures. Legislators in New York, California, New Jersey, and Illinois are quietly drafting bills that would technically remove permits but replace them with near-identical systems. California's proposed law would swap the word permit for firearm safety certification while keeping the same background checks, fees, and training requirements. New Jersey is considering mandatory approvals for every ammunition purchase. Illinois has floated the idea of abolishing permits but forcing gun owners to buy expensive liability insurance instead. These new models may have different names, but they achieve the same restrictive effect. Experts warn that unless the Supreme Court issues a broad ruling, states will simply rebrand permits and continue enforcing control under another title. If the court rules against the states, the effects will be immediate and nationwide. More than 40 million Americans could legally carry firearms without needing any government approval. Gun sales would surge overnight, training and insurance industries would explode, and states with strict laws would face massive legal challenges. If the court rules in favor of the states, however, it could establish a dangerous precedent that constitutional rights can be conditioned on government approval. The decision would go far beyond the Second Amendment. It would reshape how all fundamental rights are interpreted. At its core, this battle isn't just about guns. It's about power. Who controls your rights? You or the government? Supporters of permit-free carry argue that freedom doesn't need a license. They say safety begins with responsibility, not permission. Opponents warn that removing all permits will flood public spaces with untrained carriers and increase the risk of violence. They argue that even freedom needs structure. Both sides see themselves as defenders of the Constitution. Both are terrified of what the other side might unleash. The truth is, this case will redefine more than laws. It will redefine trust. Trust between citizens and the state, between freedom and fear. The Supreme Court's decision will reveal whether America still believes rights are inherent or whether they can be managed like privileges. The justices now hold a decision that could reset the balance between individual liberty and government control for an entire generation. Oral arguments are expected in March or April, and a ruling could arrive by June. Every legal scholar in the country is watching, because no matter how it ends, America will not look the same afterward. If the plaintiffs win, the United States will see the largest expansion of personal gun rights since the founding era. If the states win, it will be the strongest endorsement of government authority over individual rights in decades. Either way, this decision will echo across every courthouse, every police department, and every home that values freedom. The next few months will decide whether the Second Amendment stands alone or remains shackled to bureaucracy. And the ripple effect won't stop there. Other rights, from free speech to privacy, could soon face similar challenges over what permission really means. As the countdown to the ruling continues, both sides are preparing for impact. Advocacy groups are fundraising, legal teams are mobilizing, and politicians are already drafting campaign ads around the outcome. The question is no longer whether change is coming. It's how dramatic that change will be. For the first time in modern history, the Supreme Court may decide that no government, state or federal, can demand a license for a fundamental right. If that happens, every state will be forced to rewrite its gun laws, and the battle over what public safety truly means will begin again from scratch. We are witnessing history unfold in real time. In a matter of months, 9 justices will decide whether Americans will continue asking permission to exercise the rights they were born with. The answer could free millions from government oversight or reaffirm that oversight as a permanent feature of American life. This isn't just another headline. It's a defining moment for the Constitution itself. So the question is simple. Should any government have the power to demand a permit for a constitutional right? Should the exercise of freedom depend on paperwork, fees, and approval stamps? Or is freedom something that cannot and should not be regulated away? The answer will soon arrive in the form of a Supreme Court ruling that every American, regardless of politics, should care about. If you believe this story matters, hit like, share this video, and drop a comment below. Tell us where you stand. Should the government have a say in how you defend yourself, or is that decision yours alone? And don't forget to subscribe to Firepower for continuing coverage as this case unfolds. We'll be tracking every argument, every reaction, and every line of the final opinion. Because in a world where information is ammunition, knowledge is your first defense. Stay sharp, stay free. And as always, this is Firepower, signing off until next time.